Hello, everyone. Happy 2024. Welcome to Crossroads of Cognizance. We're still the place where we're having community discussions about different topics. We're bringing in different awarenesses, our experiences, our thoughts, and bridging the gap between what perceived spirituality can look like and what it looks like to actually live it and to embody it. I think each of us on camera here does a great job of that. And we have our favorite guest, really, our only guest. Eric Rasbold is here with us today. And it is because of our very special topic, and that is what we're going to be discussing: enlightenment, healing, and self-improvement. There's overlaps, but they are vastly different in some ways. And so with this, from previous conversations, we know that Eric has been involved in different spiritual studies, different enlightenment studies. And so we hope to sort of have a very fluid conversation here between the three of us. But while we're doing that, housekeeping things, drop your name and your comments in the comment box, and we'll see you. If you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, just say what you like, do what you will. And for those of us who are here for the first time, you probably are wondering who we are. So I'm Dahlia. I'm here over on the East Coast of the United States. And what do? Who am I? I am, today, I am all of it, the whole thing. Today, I am a chicken with my head cut off because I am running around like this is the first time I'm sitting down today. But other than that, when I'm not playing a chicken with my head cut off, I help people through spiritual circumstances with healing sessions, readings, classes. What do they call those? Resources, spiritual resources. And I spend my day in the ethers trying to help people sort out their lives. But I'm not here by myself.
Go, honey.
All right, for those of you who don't know me, Eric Rasbold. I'm Katrina Rasbold's husband. How do I talk about who I am? There's an existential question right there. Who am I? I am a seeker. If I had to put it into one word, I've been looking for spiritual truths my whole life. I've been a disciple of Yogananda's for over 20 years. I've been a student of several other schools of thought and practice. I began life serious and technical, and then kind of moved over to etheric and spiritual. And I'm the yoga guy, I'm the meditation guy, I'm the Reiki guy. Also co-owner of Crossroads Metaphysical, our metaphysical store that Katrina and I have put together, and also the co-founder and creator of the CoC philosophical doctrine of spiritual manifestation, which we have been running for 20, 25, 26 years. Honey, is that right? Yeah,
yep.
Long time. And just a guy out here in Northern California enjoying the mountains. That's that's the 3-minute version.
Hi, I'm Katrina Rasbold. I'm the other half of Crossroads Occult, and you can find us at crossroadsoccult.com. We offer spiritual cleansings, readings, spiritual consultation. We do magical supplies that we make ourselves, and I also do readings. And we just live the magical life. I'm the editor of Green Egg Magazine, which is one of the first pagan periodicals available in the United States. It's now in digital form, and love doing that. That's pretty much who I am and what I do. And I'm also here every Thursday with Dahlia, and excited to have Eric in. This time I wanted him to be a part of this because this is so much his jam. And where he said that he went from the analytical to the spiritual and is very cerebral about his path. I've always said I'm more of hold my beer, I'm going in. I'm very sort of folk magic-y, just in the moment. I don't do a lot of thinking through of my magical process. I just let her rip. So, so he's the dude, and this is very much up his alley, especially with a lot of the different philosophies that he's followed of other people. He can speak very intelligently to the ancient wisdoms and that sort of thing. And my ancient wisdoms all speak sort of um, Appalachian country speak, so not quite as articulate, but articulate in our own way.
Well, that brings us to our topic, right? Like the different studies of and different paths. Um, I found myself thinking about this topic and being like, wait a minute, aren't we all reaching for enlightenment in our own way? Our own definition as far as that is concerned. But I guess for the literal definition of enlightenment, I tend to also look at like Buddhism or paths that specifically speak to trying to attain this sort of middle way. And so, as we were as the topic was unfolding in off camera, one of the stories I was telling was how I'd been in a conversation where the discussion was enlightenment versus a healing path. And with the choice of enlightenment, this individual was talking about how they were seeking like to remove sort of negative thoughts and get to their best selves. And their assumption was that I was doing the same, and I was like, "Well, I'm not on the healing path. I'm not on an enlightenment path. I'm on the healing path." And so, for me, what that looks like is I want to integrate and really do a dance with my emotions to fully understand what they are, so that I can fully understand myself. Which I feel like enlightenment opts to transcend that process. And so they look very different to me. And I was like, well, I'm not necessarily trying to move away from anything here, at least at this stage of my journey. And so I wanted to get on here and ask Katrina and Eric sort of one, what does enlightenment look like to either of you?
Well, one thing that I would say based on some of the stuff that you have mentioned is the paths that I have followed for my own, I would call spiritual development
Mm-hmm.
or magical intensification or whatever you want to point to, have not really used words like enlightenment or actualization. It's
Mm-hmm.
very hands-on, it's very experiential. And so it's only really through Eric that I begin to have these sort of, for lack of a better term, new agey perspectives on what I'm doing or what other people are doing. And of course, when we talk about ideas like enlightenment, it's very subjective what that does mean. It was, in a way, it was an ambition of mine, but I wouldn't know that I would use those words for it. There was one year, because part of what CoC does is we generate new things every year based on
Okay.
the agricultural cycle. And one year, when Eric and I were really desperate and really dumb, we decided that we were going to plant actualization as one of our goals. And that year was just bullshit.
That was a long time ago.
That was really all
Yeah.
bad. Don't do that. And that brings me to say that when the person you were speaking to was talking about the ambition of rejecting or eliminating or relieving all negative thought, what came into my mind from my experience is that negative thoughts are some of our greatest teachers. And in absence of that, we don't have a contrast that creates enlightenment.
Hmm.
And that's my feel on it. I feel like negative thoughts are an extremely human experience. And I think that to transcend negative thought, invites the idea that we are going to transcend humanity. And my ambition is to exploit and enjoy and ride out humanity as far as I can, as long as I can, as hard as I can. And so part of that is the growing evaluation of our negative thoughts and deciding their usefulness or lack thereof.
Hmm.
In any situation we happen to be in. It's much easier, I have found, to not have negative thoughts when you are in a comfortable place. And so you don't really exercise that muscle very much. So when you do begin to have negative thoughts, if you're in a positive place, it becomes an aberration, so that you're saying, what do I do with this? This feels really odd. And I think that, to me, is the greatest ambition of enlightenment, is to have that be the exception rather than the rule. But when it does come, to look at it and see what lessons, what messages does it happen to be bringing. So to me, that's what enlightenment means to me, is not the transcension of negative thought, but the appropriate use of natural negative thought. That's where I'm going to go. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. Almost the only idea I had pre-show about what you suggested is when I think of the words enlightenment, healing, and self-improvement, it feels like almost a hierarchy of divinity in a way.
Hmm.
But I don't know that any of those three things has to happen. Kind of put it has to happen exclusive of one another.
Sure.
And I don't know that any of those three things have to happen inclusive of one another.
Hmm.
That they can all be a very individual journey, or they can be somehow interrelated. So that's all I got. Absolutely. You and Eric just carry the show from there. That's where I'm at.
Okay, so was the question what is enlightenment? Is that what you're into us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I'm staying on track here. So first of all,
he
before
has not spoken yet, he's implying I got him off track and that he wants to get me on track, right?
no, not at all. I just so what Katrina said before, is very accurate. I tend to analyze things for a very, very, very long time before I take any action, whereas Katrina will just go in there and just say, "Hey, let's see what this is all about," which I think works as a really good, really good balance. Yeah. I'm actually right now. I'm entering into a certain mystery school that I actually analyzed since for 27 years before I finally was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and go into this. So like, that can stifle me a little bit, I guess, but whatever. So let me first say that when it comes to, especially speaking on topics of a spiritual nature that are intangible, ephemeral in any way, I like to reference back to Al-Ghazali's book called The Prohibitions of the Tongue. Okay, and this is something that was written around 1040, 1050, so a long time ago. Guy's name is Al-Ghazali. If you don't know him, check him out. He's amazing. But he was an Islamic philosopher. But anyway, one of the prohibitions of the tongue is to not speak of things that you do not know of. Okay. I never will pretend to knowledge. I certainly won't pretend to experiences that I haven't had. Okay. So I will say that. And in saying that, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm enlightened, so I'm going to tell you what it's about. Okay. Like I said, I have been a disciple of Yogananda's, of the Self-Realization Fellowship and the Yogoda Satsanga Society, which practices the Kriya Yoga for the aim of liberation, moksha, for over 20 years. And this kind of spiritual pursuit or path has been my life's aim probably since before I've been able to form memory. Okay, so to say that, am I on a path of enlightenment? Yeah, I think so. Do I really know what it is? Not really, but I do know some of it. And one part of it actually has a lot to do with the topics, all three topics of this discussion, the enlightenment, healing, and self-improvement, in that I think it all starts with the realization, not just the knowledge, but the realization that you are not this body. Okay, you have a body, you are a soul. Okay, and the brain or your mind is the interface with which your soul communicates with the body. Okay, I think that's one of the first steps of understanding to help us transcend the idea of the finality of death or the initiation of our existence in this birth. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So enlightenment, if you read okay, you talked about Buddhism, right? What's the Bodhisattva vow, right? To take on the suffering of the world, basically, for the salvation of all and the liberation of the self. Liberation of the self, meaning the removal from the karmic cycle, the samsara, right? The constant death and rebirth, okay, into that state of nirvana where you no longer have to, you are not forced to participate in that rebirth cycle, right? That would be the Buddhist or the Buddha's definition of enlightenment. What does that mean? What does that entail? What kind of knowledge do you gain? What kind of powers do you gain? Again, I'm not going to pretend to that kind of knowledge because I don't know. But I'm not there. I don't believe I've, gotten to that state yet. I think if I had, I'd probably know. But as far as the idea, the realization that the soul is separate from the body and the brain and the mind, I do have that. Okay, so already in that place where that it's not, that this is a continuous cycle, that there's so much more to it than we see or can even read about. That's already known. That's already in my past. So I continue along that path and see where those meditations take me. And yeah, I know that's not a definition really, but I think it's the starting point of it.
Right. Well, and based on what you were saying, enlightenment is, and maybe we've said this of spirituality as well, but there's no destination. Basically, it is sort of a lived experience. And I think you even said before the show, you were like, well, if you think you're there, you're not, or something to that effect. In the pursuit of all three, spirituality, enlightenment, not spirituality, healing, enlightenment, and self-improvement, what I found interesting about what Katrina was saying was two things: the hierarchy system, and then the part about how alleviating negative thoughts is easier to do when you're comfortable. So, like, diving back to what Eric was saying about it being a path that's unfolding for him, to the hierarchy that Katrina mentioned, it almost seems like you start out in self-improvement, you get into the healing process, and then sort of get into a rhythm of comfortability where I believe when we start to do, as Eric was talking about, where you start realizing that the soul is separate from the body, then you can get into real comfort instead of perceived, maybe even material comfort. And then enlightenment, the doors of enlightenment sort of beckon, and you can start to pursue that as a path. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, without the understanding that the soul is completely separate from the body, that soul is eternal and the body is not, as you get older especially, or have your first encounters with mortality, an accident, a serious illness, fear starts to grow within you. And that fear can hold you back from everything, not just life, but even the things that concern afterlife, and religions, all those things can get in there and can cloud that clear, sentient search of truth. And that's something that really hurts us. So it's almost like without that understanding, there might be a window of time when you're young and healthy and don't have a care in the world where you can kind of contemplate these things. But once you start to get older and the fear grips you and the confusion gets stronger, then you're you can be stuck. And that's that's going to block self-improvement, block healing, and for sure block enlightenment.
I could definitely get behind that.
I think fear is definitely one thing that is a major block in most spiritual development that we encounter. So I can definitely sign on to that. Now, something that dawned on me as each of you are talking, when I was looking at enlightenment, healing, and self-improvement, which were the cornerstones of that trifecta we were looking at, I realized that self-improvement and healing both have what I would call a mundane component to them. Now, we can go with the idea that everything is magical, everything we do is spiritual development. But if we were a total atheist, a total realist, we don't believe in anything beyond this body, this experience, this biological happening, we can still have healing, if we embrace the idea of Western medicine that I have a headache, I take a Tylenol, headache goes away, that's healing. There isn't a huge spiritual component to that, but it would still be defined as healing. Self-improvement, if I take a night class to learn how to do photography, if I, exercise more, that's self-improvement, but it's not necessarily a spiritual experience for everybody. Enlightenment, however, is a word that's very difficult to apply to a mundane experience. And what I came into thinking too when Eric was talking is, and again, he and I have, and I've said this many times, he and I have very different perspectives on certain things. And what I was thinking is, to me, enlightenment is more of a byproduct. I know that there are whole systems set up on the pursuit of enlightenment, and I respect that, and I get that, and I'm just absolutely as signed on for that as I am for my own theory. But to me, everything that I experienced that I could call anything like enlightenment did not happen because I was pursuing it. It happened because of an experience that was divinely sent to me. That wasn't always easy. That usually wasn't easy at all. But the byproduct of that was a degree of enlightenment that informed a great deal of my spiritual perspective, even though I wasn't looking for it. So to me, enlightenment isn't something that I seek. It's something like, it happens when you're busy making other plans. that enlightenment came from unexpected places, unexpected experiences, unexpected hardships, and unexpected joys. When I tried to pursue the enlightenment, to me, it was like chasing some wild animal that knew the forest better than I did. But when I just relaxed and let life happen to me and follow the trails that were put before me with other ambitions, it seemed like that was where I found enlightenment.
I can definitely sign on to that as well. Between the two of you, Eric, clarifying the journey of enlightenment with the separation of the soul and the body, and then you talking about living these experiences. I was brought back to this place when I was younger where I wanted to be a Buddhist, and I started diving into the threefold path and all the different things, and then hormones kicked in, and rage and emotion and sadness.
Not ready to take that vow, huh?
And it like completely dissolved. And it just became, I admired Buddhism, but I could never see myself as one, because it was so, it felt so far beyond my reach. And wishing that I'd had somebody on my team to tell me, like, hey, your lived experiences are going to bring you that sort of awareness that enlightenment can, and that enlightenment isn't a summation, but rather these well, and I can't like actually define it here, I am trying to, but you can have enlightenment in the micro moments that sort of add together to new experiences, new ways of thinking, not being controlled by external circumstances, and so on and so forth. And I love since it's here in the comments, we have Bram dropping a very mindful quote here. What is it that you said, Katrina, in response to that?
One of my mentors used to say, but this was in the context of spell work,
Oh,
that fear and doubt are where magic goes to die. That if you are doing any type of spell work and you are afraid of what the outcome is going to be of your spell work, or you are doubtful of your own abilities or your own motivations, that will absolutely sap all the power out of what you're doing.
oh.
So
Well,
can I? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it'll definitely sap the power out of your quest for enlightenment. Real quick. Go ahead, Eric.
I wanted to ask you. You said that you'd studied Buddhism. So Buddha himself was against the Sangha. Okay, was against the rules of the bhikkhus, the monks. Most of the Rinpoches out there were householders. They were married. Most of the enlightened masters, I mean, even Yogananda's grandmaster was a householder, and he was considered to be a fully realized being. Interestingly, most of the people that have been credited with achieving that final liberation were not monks, were not ascetics. They were anchorites, but they were not ascetics. So that's so you might not have had to have foregone, and joined the
Right. You just made it attainable for me. Yes.
It's what we do, Daniel. It's what we do.
I'm getting off this broadcast and doing it again.
Yeah. In fact, I'm reading a book right now called The Way of the White Cloud. And I don't this guy right here, right? Like when I said when I'm reading it now, I mean I'm reading it like right now. I don't know if you can see it, but and they talk about this is a Lama wrote this, and it's back in the 30s, and they talk about that very thing. This guy, he's in Tibet for many, many, many years, goes through Ceylon and Thailand. Anyway, his pilgrimages and travels, but does talk about how the Buddha was against that rule making, the stifling of the path of enlightenment through these different rules and strictures of monastic ideal. He said that was crap. Buddha said, "Come." That's what he said. Come. It's the same thing like the Upanishads, right? Upanishads, right? Come forth and be destroyed. That's what Upanishad means. It has nothing to do with rules and regulations. It's come forward and accept the knowledge, accept the discipline, join the sadhana, and you will be on the path, that you'll be on the Dharma. That's what Dharma is. So,
well,
yeah.
It seems like the same can be said for sort of different. Oh,
we still have you here, honey.
No, it's me. I'm sorry, it's me.
Oh. It seems like the same could be said for things like Reiki and even like witchcraft and Wicca, and the minute that people start to come in and sort of impose what their will, which then they declare the most enlightened or the most clear or the most pure. Like I've seen many people, not to yuck anybody's yum, but just to be like, my path or my energy that I've been attuned to is the highest form of and the purest, and it's very interesting to watch that come from someone when it's like, well, if it was, would you be passionately describing it this way? And it seems like not. Like that's where I'm going with this. Like if you have to say it, maybe it's not entirely true. Who are you trying to convince, kind of thing. So I guess in that way I am with Buddha, or throw the rules away, basically.
Yeah, totally.
But I love that Buddhism is now more attainable. I'm here for that. I was worried. I think we've kind of tackled this question. As I mentioned on the last show, we'll be spending a bit more time on Reddit, looking at all the interesting things that come up. And on topic with what we were talking about tonight, or what we are talking about tonight, was a question: how will you know that you are enlightened. And like Eric touched on that, but I guess for either of you, can you speak to a moment that you experienced an enlightenment or a type of sort of enlightenment process and what it felt like, or what was it like for you?
Jimmy, go ahead, huh?
Yeah.
I think the closest that I've gotten to the feeling of, if I were to describe enlightenment as complete unity, not in a regressive kind of way, but I don't really know how to describe it. Just that feeling of, in this moment that lasts just a fraction of a few seconds, okay, where you feel as if you are everything and everything is you, and there's no kind of knowledge that, is withheld from you, or feeling that is unknown to you, would be in those places that are between the breaths in deep, deep, deep meditation. When you let that breath out and you're in that stillness, that pause between exhalation and inhalation, and time seems to stretch out. It feels as if everything in your body completely stops, and you feel this expansion of yourself, where everything that is. So meditation, I like to think of as going inward to get out. Okay.
Right.
It's the point when you actually get out. Okay. And everything is out there, and there's no way to talk about it in language, because what you're experiencing doesn't have anything to do with, it's not relatable in language. And I always thought that was such a cop out when people would say that, like, oh, I can't talk about it because English just doesn't cut it. And you're just like, come on, man. But when you experience it, it's almost like everyone knows what color is, but how would you describe a color that's not within the electromagnetic spectrum that we can see? How would you describe that in words, in English? You can't, right? How would you describe color to a blind person? You can't do it. No matter their command of sound in the form of language, they will never understand what color is, because like any other experience, I could talk to you all day about apples, but if you've never bit into an apple, you don't know anything about apples. Okay. So it's kind of like that. So it's very hard to speak about it. It's very hard to write about it, because it's something that you have to do. That's the best I can get with it. Now, is that enlightenment? No, I don't think so. Is it an enlightening moment that informs what you're doing on this path here in my life right now? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's, I think, the best I have for that. So that's why everybody needs to meditate.
So I think that if you want to know if someone else is enlightened, it's kind of like wanting to know if someone else is vegan. Don't worry, they'll tell you.
I think that's another thing. If you're telling people you are, you're probably
right.
not.
And that's exactly true.
Yeah.
And like, I love what Bram said. I think it was it Osho that said that? I'm trying to remember who originated the statement, but it was before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And that's just saying that we continue to have a mundane, ordinary life with needs and expectations, even after we become the wisest, most enlightened person in the world. And I think that is a very, very great wisdom. I think the closest I've come to anything I would consider enlightenment is, and I'm going to tell an old story like my mom used to say. I'm going to tell you that to tell you this. There was a time, it was around 1996, and my son, David, was in a high school play, was in high school drama, and it was The Sound of Music. And this high school played, they either completely went off grid and just did the play without permission, or they paid bucks to do The Sound of Music. I can't say. But I was in Mountain Home, Idaho, which is the armpit of the world. I hate it. I had hated it for a year and a half. I had just remarried what I considered the love of my life. And so I'm sitting there alone because my husband at that time couldn't make it to this production. And I'm getting ready to watch my son perform in this play. And they had sort of a, how can I put it? Like a pre-show. They had an opener for the play, and it was the dancing of these kids called the Swing Kids. And these were high school kids who were doing swing dancing. And they did a performance, and they were just amazing. I mean, the swing dancing that they did was beautiful. It was on point, and they were having a hell of a time. They were just grinning like possums. They never stopped exuding this joy when they were doing this dancing. And it wasn't that fake da 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 da. I mean, they were just in it to win it. They were having such a good time. And sitting there with my ass hurting on these high school bleachers, I started to just sob. I mean, tears just coming down my face because I realized I had never felt joy like that in my entire life.
Wow.
And that was so profoundly disruptive to me and off-putting and so many other things that, oh my God, I'm this old. I have 4 kids at that time. I just remarried, or, a year and a half ago, remarried the person I really, really love. And I'm so sad that I've never been happy. I've never been that happy. And so that night I went home. It happened to be a full moon, and I was on base housing. So it's like way public. And we had a fence around our backyard, our little postage stamp size backyard. And I had on a white sheet, nothing but a white twin sheet. I just wrapped myself in it. And I went up to the full moon, and I just opened it up, and I said, "Bring me joy. Bring me, do what, I don't care. Do whatever it takes. You have carte blanche. Goddess, change everything. But I want that. I deserve that. Do that." I want to tell you, within just a few months, that husband had left me for somebody else, abandoned our family. I relocated. I literally took a pendulum over the map of the United States to see where I should go because the military had moved me anywhere within a certain radius. And I had this friend, Eric, out in Sacramento, and some other friends. And so I relocated to Sacramento and had the hardest time for years after. Even after Eric and I were married, he knows and will not deny that, man, it was rough. It was really rough. And I was old, so we had 2 more babies right away because we wanted to stamp them out before my eggs became completely unusable. And like I said, I told you that to tell you this. That was the that. This is the this. After things became as they did, and we moved on 20 plus years later, more than 25 years later, well, 25-ish years later, I began to have prolonged feelings of joy and satisfaction and happiness and elation. And it reflected me back to that contrast of asking for that, the disruption that had to happen, because I would never have had that, the path I was on. There was no chance. I couldn't see it then, but thank Goddess, the divine was able to see it and heard my cry and sent this amazing person to my life who, by all rights at that moment, had no right to be my deliverance at all. Not my type, not my interest. But the second I met that person, my first words to them were, "Hello, Destiny." And we walked the rockiest path together. I mean, it was crazy. But my point about the enlightenment is the closest I have come has been within, I would say, the last year of sitting still and feeling ripples of joy flow through me, and feeling a connectedness to something beyond myself, and having the mantras go through me. There is no wisdom that exists other than this. And there is no joy that exists other than this. There's no blessedness that exists other than this. There's no understanding that exists other than, there's no being that exists other than this. And that just felt like such a sense of oneness with all that we as humans often aspire to achieve. And so that felt like, I think that's the closest I ever got to it. And if I hadn't been so broken to invite that in, I don't think I ever could have achieved that.
And what sounds like, is even as powerful as your experience was, there was more. Like, and Eric alluded to that too. It's just like you have that flash, and then there's more. There are more bursts over time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You're able to, once you know what it is and how it feels and the mechanism to get there. Shoot, I mean, just today, I was down doing a really killer yin yoga sesh down in the downtown this morning, and there in the inverted pigeon pose, I got to that point. You're just following the breath, and you get to that stillness, and all of a sudden, just everything just kind of fades away, but also joins in this total union of whatever, the people with you and the whole world. It's weird. It's kind of hard to describe, but when you know how to get there, you can get there easier and get there longer and begin to kind of explore what's there.
So what occurred to me as he was saying that is this is exactly like an orgasm.
Hey,
that it's overwhelming. It's very personal. It builds over time. It is indescribable. You couldn't possibly describe it, or sneeze. You couldn't possibly describe it to somebody else. You can't get there until you've been there and figured out the path to get there. And I think that's why Buddha just said, come, okay?
Well, and but everything is coming is the thing.
Y'all heard it wrong.
So.
Spelled it wrong.
That's fantastic. Like that explanation on the back of a shirt, but on the front, just come.
Boom, mic drop.
That would be, I can picture that. Just come, Buddha, You'd sell 1 million of those.
Yeah. Actually, we might need to put those on the internet.
I think I'm gonna
copyright it immediately.
I said it first. No.
Eric also coined the phrase "In God We Trust" when we were doing Guadalupe work.
Oh,
yeah.
Anyway,
all these. I'm gonna go back through our shows, and we're gonna have merch.
Amen.
Have a shirt that says "I told you that to tell you this."
As you guys are describing your enlightenment moments, and I love how Eric brought it back to just even like a recent moment. The innocence of those moments is evident, right? Like there's this like playful, childlike, I don't need to control this experience. And I recognize similarly for my path as well. So, I mean, I often have moments of enlightenment in my car because I love sitting in my car. Like it's completely closed in. It's my world. And so if there's anywhere where I actually need freedom, it's in the car. And I had this experience actually just before we got on, and I almost was late getting on because I was like, I can't believe that was a realization. I didn't come in the car, but I had the waves of joy and openness and expansion, just sitting there thinking about, I was thinking about obstacles and recurring themes, and having a moment where that same thread revealed itself. And sitting in front of something that very intentionally has brought me a lot of pain as a block, but then to also sit with the thing I chose. Like, it's not something that was happening to me. It was,
Right.
I was choosing. And so it was like this infinity loop of like, I chose you, but you hurt, but I chose you, and like navigating my life in an hour. And then at the end of it, arriving at this point and saying, I can choose different. And then like you were saying, this indescribable feeling came over. And I even had like I look for universal responses whenever something shifts, like really shifts. I have a deal with the universe where like, hey, prove it. And they're like, oh, look at all your blocks rain. Look at your blocks release, and things rain from the sky. And they did. And I know that sounds really vague, but it happened. But yes, I guess describing enlightenment makes you sound very incoherent.
So, it's a total absorption in a thing. Okay. You can have, the Ashtanga, right? The eightfold, the 8 limbs, the Ashtanga.
I don't know if I got that far.
I
don't think I did.
Well, check it out, right? But I mean, I don't want to eat up a bunch of time just going over it here, unless you want me to really quickly. But it's just Patanjali, right? He has his sutras, and he has his the Ashtanga, the inner and outer injunctions, the asana, the pranayama, the pratyahara, things like that, right? So one of the final stages before samadhi, which is the liberation, is the type of concentration that's called dharana, and that's the absorption in whatever it is you're thinking about. And I mean absorption in the way that, like when you were a little kid playing with a stick in the creek, and there was absolutely nothing going on earth, within you or without, other than you playing with that stick. Okay, where they say you are the seer, the sight, and the seen, okay, all in one. Okay, so the object, the subject, and the medium by which it is being observed, you are that all in one at the same time. That kind of absorption, I believe, is exactly what I describe as those moments between breath where you feel that, you've gone out by going in. That's exactly what that is. And that's the kind of thing we're searching for. That's the kind of thing we're trying to do, getting lost in something like that leads to that liberation, that meditation. Does that make sense? That sounded totally incoherent. I thought I'd throw that in there.
No, that sounded so wise. It was way above me. That was super wise.
It sounds like a elevated version of flow state. Like if I was to take it and simplify it into what I've seen other people talk about flow state is, and what I've experienced as flow state. And so to the question of how do you know when you're enlightened, it doesn't sound like there is like an overarching answer, but more like you can know where it starts, and it may unfold differently, even down to the individual, each time you have an enlightened experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
I think one of the main things to consider is that you're not going to necessarily know. You might in retrospect, but you're not. And a lot of times in the moment of that absorption, but you're not going to get a gold star. You're not going to get a little badge to put on your, Chewbacca bandolier or something like that to say, okay, now you're enlightened.
Right.
You may or may not have people look at you all doughy-eyed and say, you're the most enlightened person I know. I mean, if to continue the orgasm metaphor, people that are talking about it aren't doing it. It's just so personal, and it's rare that we have these conversations where we're saying, well, what is it to you? And what is it to you? And that's when we really start to get the whole picture, is in the bringing together of different forms of enlightenment and different impressions of enlightenment. And so that's why I'm so grateful you picked this topic. It's a really great subject.
Well, thanks. Came in enlightenment. um, I love what you were saying about this like bringing together the conversations. I think that's very important for every timeline that I see for our like development as human beings, and that ends in something positive, is this weaving together of individuality. It's not and that's why I kind of wanted to have the conversation, was because the different perspectives allow for each of us to arrive at the places that we need to, and then weave that into the greater wholeness of the planet. Like in right now, one of the major things I think is that's wrong is that we are told that certain ways of being are wrong, bad, better than others, etc. And when I looked at this topic, I saw the three different styles of path: enlightenment, healing, and self-improvement. And I thought to myself, you know, I think that the self-improvement industry tends to merge enlightenment and healing and self-improvement in a way that can be detrimental if we're not having these conversations to say, hey, my experiences were different, but they don't diminish yours. If you are self-improving and not gaining enlightenment, not having the experiences, it's okay. If you are healing and you have an enlightened experience, that's okay. Like Eric was saying, and like Katrina was saying, um, you know, it's indescribable to what Eric was saying, and Katrina was saying that they don't have to be mutually exclusive, and they also don't have to overlap. So one of the things that I would love to see in the comment section, based on some of the things that we described, not as a right or wrong experience, but has anybody who's watching this had what they feel is an enlightened experience? What did that look like for you? Did it come through healing? Did it come through becoming one with everything? Did it come when you were sitting on the toilet and wondering, what's going to happen today? And you realize that it doesn't matter and time doesn't exist. And then you just completely shifted. We would love to hear what you guys have to say about this topic. And do we have any closing thoughts on the topic at hand? Anybody?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I don't think every person on the earth is on a path of enlightenment at this time or for this go around. I mean, I think people come here for different reasons. Maybe we don't all come from the same place. Maybe we don't all have the same goals, so you can still, even if you don't have an interest in, perfect spiritual liberation or all that kind of stuff, self-improvement and healing should be a part of everyone's way of life, I think. Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be on any kind of particular path of any kind to affect changes through the different healing arts, whether it's Western, Eastern, whatever, internal, external, energetic, or mechanical. And self-improvement, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, just, there are things in life that you want to do, things you want to be able to do, and changing your ways to help ensure that you can do those things for longer or do them better. I mean, that's self-improvement to me. Could be, learning a different language, quitting smoking pot. I mean, whatever, those are things people can do without having anything to do with a spiritual path. So I think the healing and self-improvement is something that's universal, whereas the idea of enlightenment are for people who have chosen to walk that path and maybe come here time and time again to continue walking that dharma, that path. And, that's my closing thought on it. We didn't talk too much about healing specifics and self-improvement specifics. So
True.
When I'm looking, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Katrina.
When I'm looking at what Colleen is saying, we had our most recent broadcast was talking about death and discussing a person who was expressing an intense fear of death. And in the context of that conversation, we talked about near-death experiences and how there is a sort of theme to them a lot of the time, but that they're also very unique and very individual. And some people come away from those feeling like they have a certain level of enlightenment that has shifted how they view life on earth or this mortal life, and some people don't. So I think that near death experience is like all near death experience, very personal and has its own messages or lack thereof, depending on what that experience is in regard to your lifetime and your processing. The person that we were referencing came to it as just fear, just absolute terror of dying. And we actually, Dahlia and I talked about how most of the people we've known who have had near-death experience did not come away with that experience of fear.
Right.
So everybody has a different, and for some people it's enlightening, and some people it's not. I don't know.
Yeah. Debilitating.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So about the near-death experience, I have not had a near-death experience, which is unusual given some of the things that I enjoy doing, right? But there are, for people who are interested in near-death experience, there are two very excellent YouTube channels. I have probably watched 1,000 accounts between these two channels. One is called Next Level Soul Podcast, right? And it's video based like this. It's not an actual podcast, but they call it a podcast. The other one is called Love Covered Life, I think it is. Yeah, that is it. And in there is a common thread of information that these people, it doesn't matter what religious background they're from. Well, okay, let me first say, if they are from a religious background, right, they generally will have visions and experiences that are concurrent or at least concomitant with that particular faith. But there are always things in their experience, even in their own expression or translation of their experience, that points to that dharmic path and rebirth and coming back and all that. It's very interesting. It's really interesting to hear that. And like, there you go, Next Level Soul Podcast, yeah. And then Love Covered Life is the other one. And it's really trippy. So if you're interested in near-death experiences, watch a couple dozen of those and you'll see that common theme, regardless of spiritual or total atheist, or they have people from all different walks of life that are covered on this. Not just Westerners either, which I like. They show people from other countries, other cultures, other languages, other belief systems, and you always have that common thread. It's interesting. I'm bummed out that I never had a near-death experience, but not really.
Okay.
Right. Talk about Russian roulette.
Yeah.
Is it going to be near death?
At some point I'm going to have a death experience. That's probably good enough for me.
Well, we'll keep those stories and those comments coming, guys, or those questions. That was great, Colleen. You've got a couple of references there for your week of research until we're back next week. And keep journeying on whatever path you all are on, knowing that it doesn't have to be so structured. It doesn't have to be, well, if you're doing this, then that's not enlightenment. If you're doing this, that's not healing. It can be an amalgamation, a juicy coming together of whatever feels right to you. And I always throw in as long as you're not hurting anybody else.
Yeah, pretty much.
But on that note, it is time for us to let you all go back to your lives. And thank you for joining us, Eric, on the first of the year, our first show of the year. And we will catch you all next time on Crossroads of Cognizance. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.